Hey folks, Robbie Payne with Chrome Unboxed, and today we're going to be taking a look at two devices side by side that's been more requested than pretty much anything else since the Pixelbook was released, and it's the Pixelbook and the Samsung Chromebook Pro. Now these devices share a ton of stuff in common, but there's a lot of stuff that's quite a bit different, and the main one being the price tag. And so we want to take a deeper look and help you make a decision, especially at this time of year. We're filming this right around Thanksgiving, so it's that time of year when people are making purchasing decisions, but it could be 6 months from now that you're actually still thinking about whether or not to buy one of these two devices. And so we want to help you all make purchasing decisions based on what you actually see when they're side by side, because it's hard to actually get your hands on those. So let's get started. All right, so we're going to dig right on in. And first thing we're going to talk about is build quality. Now, what I'd like you to do is just kind of take the idea of price and what you may or may not know about how much these devices cost and just kind of put that to the side until we get to the end, so that we can kind of just compare apples to apples for right now. So we're looking at some similarities here, but some pretty stark differences when we come to actual build quality. And so the Pixelbook, as you can see, is actually a decent bit longer from side to side than the Samsung Chromebook Pro. Now, that's going to play into a few things here in a few minutes, but that's something to keep in mind. The devices are relatively similar in their width. The Samsung Chromebook Pro is a little bit wider than the Pixelbook, and you can feel it. So from day-to-day use, when you're carrying the thing around, they don't weigh that much different. I want to say they're within like a gram or two of each other, but you can actually, for whatever reason, feel the difference in the thickness. So as far as the thickness of the device, the Pixelbook actually feels much, much thinner. And part of that is because it's kind of got these boxy sides to it. And the boxy sides are good looking and they help you grip the device really well, but they're not as comfortable to hold it in, say, in tablet mode or something like that. Whereas the Samsung Chromebook Pro has these nice rounded edges. They feel a little bit more organic. Again, the flip side of that is when you flip them into tablet mode, the way the sides on the Chromebook Pro meet with one another, because they're rounded, kind of have this sandwiched Oreo effect. So there's a gap kind of between, versus on the Pixelbook, whenever you close this thing, it's one solid flat feel all the way around. And so it kind of feels like a cohesive device. So when you're in tablet mode, though the Pixelbook is a little bit larger, it kind of has this more secure feel because the sides meet up the way that they should for a tablet. When we start talking about the quality of the build, that's where the Pixelbook really kind of moves ahead quite a bit from the Samsung Chromebook Pro. That's not to say that the Pro feels terrible or cheap, but there's a little bit more flimsiness to the overall chassis in the Pro versus the Pixelbook. The Pro being black picks up a lot more fingerprints, and overall the keyboard deck has a little bit more give to it. The device can kind of be bent a little bit easier, and so it just kind of has a slightly flimsy feel to it from time to time. Again, I'm not saying it's bad, and it's aluminum, and so it doesn't feel cheap necessarily, but after you handle the Pixelbook for just a little bit and then go to handle the Pro, you can definitely tell the difference. And so the win for sure goes to the Pixelbook, especially when we start talking about design touches, when the palm rests, the way you've got that kind of white bar across the top and on the insides and on the feet. All of those things, the Pixelbook just feels more premium, and we would expect it to. But again, we're comparing apples to apples here and not talking about price. I'm just saying one device compared to the other. The Pixelbook feels better. It's firmer, it's better built, and it kind of has a better looking aesthetic overall to it too. So the next thing we normally talk about in reviews is screen quality, and this one is actually a complete push. We're pretty sure, we can't get the exact model numbers, but we're fairly certain that the screen on both of these devices is actually identical. Granted, they're housed in different things, but the colors are the exact same, the brightness is the same, the size of the screen's the same, the resolution's the same. So literally, you're not getting any better when you go with the Pixelbook versus the Samsung Chromebook Pro. The minute you set these things side by side, you begin to notice one thing that is different about them, and that's the bezels. So over here, we have a more symmetrical bezel. The top and bottom bezels are still larger, but over here, we have three sides of a much smaller bezel on the Samsung. Now that's gonna play into some stuff with the keyboard here in a few minutes, but it does look a little more modern to me, and a lot of people have commented that, and I think that's the case. What's odd about the Samsung and the way that they've put their screen is that down here with the hinge, that you've got more room with the hinge and a much larger bezel because you've got Samsung written across here. And so now the whole screen is kind of offset up versus the Pixelbook. Everything's kind of set in here pretty square. Now, if you look real close, the bottom bezel is a slight bit bigger than the top bezel, and that's to deal with the hinge part, and that's just part of convertibles. The Pixelbook gets as close as I've seen to actually giving you a pretty symmetrical bezel all around on a convertible, but that's still, you know, there's still a little bit larger bezel down here, and overall the bezels they're pretty big on the Pixelbook. It's not bothered me in day-to-day use, but it's there, especially when you look at it in comparison with this one. All right, so moving on, we're going to talk about input methods now. So we're talking about touchscreens, we're talking about pens, we're talking about keyboards, we're talking about trackpads. So let's start with touchscreens. Again, there's not really any difference here. I've not noticed any issue with either one. I would say that the hinge on the Pixelbook feels a little more firm, but not much. They both wiggle. It's just part of a convertible life. Now, one thing, and this is going to be a perfect illustration that I'm making this video right now. So the second thing would be pen. They both have pen input. They both support pen input. They're both Wacom digitizers, but they're two different ones. So EMR over here, which doesn't require a powered stylus, and over here is AES from Wacom. So the AES has advantages over EMR, and EMR has advantages over AES. And I'm not going to get into all of those because ultimately on a Chromebook, the pen works great for both of them as far as writing and all that kind of stuff. I've seen a couple reviews out there where people had to press real hard on this device. We've had a few of these devices in the office and multiple Pixelbook pens, and there's no issue like that. So that clearly was a defective one. And if you get one like that, I would either return the pen or the Pixelbook or both of them and get an exchange for that. So if that's the case, but we've not seen that behavior ever. So that's not something to concern yourself with. However, one thing that is important to note, the Pixelbook wins for comfort when you start talking about the pen and using it, because it's a full-size pen. But what are you noticing right now that I don't have in my hand, that I didn't prepare before sitting down to do this video? I don't have the pen. And I find myself in that position quite often, that I've left it in the case, or it's in my book bag, or I went down to the coffee shop and I left it up in the office and I wanted to jot down a note and I just don't have it with me. And for right now, there's some accessories coming where you can have a thing clipped here maybe and slide a pen in and have it with you all the time. But for right now, there's nowhere to put it. But you come over to the Samsung and there's, as long as you're good about putting it away, you're never gonna not have this thing with you. Now, it's not as good of a writing experience because it's like writing with a toothpick. But for jotting down a quick note, it's always there. And so for me, because I don't draw a lot, it's usually just pulling out Google Keep or annotating an image real quick or opening up Squid and taking notes during a meeting or something like that. That's how I use the pen when I use it. The Samsung wins in this department, mainly because it's always there. So now let's move on down to the keyboards. And this is a place where the Pixelbook actually completely destroys the Samsung Chromebook Pro. The Chromebook Pro has been under a lot of fire since it came out about having a subpar keyboard. Now, I've used it for a long time and it doesn't bother me that much. Now, you guys know I'm not real harsh on keyboards. It's not great. It has a decent enough amount of travel, but there's just not a clear click. So it's hard to tell sometimes if you've registered the keystroke or not. And so I know a lot of people that use computers are touch typists. You know, that's not a rare thing that, you know, we look at the screen while we type. And so to not always confidently know that you've clicked that key it is a little unsettling and makes you less accurate. Additionally, the keys are kind of just clacky, would be a good word for it. They just kind of feel like they're loose in the slots a little bit. So it's not the greatest keyboard. It reminds me a ton of the older MacBook Airs when they first came out. They just kind of have these like wiggly, loose kind of keys. And but it gets the job done. It's okay. But one of the places that aggravate people the most is the fact that because we trim these bezels on the sides, and this could be one of the reasons why Google chose not to do that. I don't know. But since we trim the bezels on a 12.3 inch screen, you only have this much chassis to actually work with now. And so that meant to keep the full size spacing on the keys here, we had to trim some stuff over here. So your backspace key is trimmed off. You have a really tiny tab key that's actually smaller than your letter keys over here, and the search button's pretty small. So it takes some getting used to. Once you get used to it, it doesn't bother you anymore. But again, it's one of those things that when you first open it up and start typing, you'll notice that immediately. It's also not backlit, and a lot of people don't love that. We're seeing signs that there possibly might finally be a backlit version of this coming. but we don't know anything for sure, and that could get scrapped. So I wouldn't hang your hopes on the fact that they're going to have a backlit version of this, but they might, and so that might solve some of that issue. Over here, we've got a backlit keyboard with keys that I can't compare to anything, to be honest with you. I love typing on this device. It's not the most travel I've ever had. Obviously, the device is super thin. It's 10 point change millimeters thin overall as a device. There's not much room in here for a keyboard, but they've done a great job at creating keys that have enough travel, but then have this really satisfying click that you know that you've hit them. I've not typed on a keyboard that feels exactly like it, and I've never enjoyed typing on a laptop keyboard quite as much as I do on this one. Add into that the silicone palm rests, and overall the typing experience is just really, really good, to the point where at my desk setup, I've actually taken my keyboard and mouse off my desk. I have my extended monitor. The Pixelbook sits right up underneath of it. I run the USB-C out, and I use the input methods on this every day, all day, because they're so good. Because going to anything else I could buy third party felt like such a step backwards. So huge props to Google for really nailing the keyboard. And so while we're there, we'll just move on to the trackpad. Trackpad is full edged glass, super buttery smooth. It's a great size, and then it nests itself really interestingly between the two silicone palm rests, and the click mechanism's perfect. The travel on it is perfect. It's as good as any other trackpad I've ever used, and all the multi-touch gestures, they work well enough on every Chromebook pretty much. And I've talked about that before, that trackpads aren't really a sore spot for Chromebooks, but this one just works so much better. The only devices I've used that have trackpads this good are the original Chromebook Pixel and the 2015 Chromebook Pixel, and this one feels just a little bit better than those. Moving over to the trackpad on the Samsung, it's serviceable. I'll say that. So in the whole sea of Chromebooks, it is definitely above average. So and really what I take into context is how well the click mechanism works and how well it slides with your hands. And it does that really well. It resists oils for the most part of the day. It's kind of small. It's a little bit narrow, but overall, the travel on it feels good. When you click it, it feels good. And so I've not really had too much problem with the Chromebook Pro trackpad. Now, the day that I started using the Pixelbook trackpad and then went back to using the Pro trackpad, I could feel a difference. There's a notable difference there, but that's not to say it's bad or it's not worth buying because the trackpad's terrible. It's one of the better ones. It's just nowhere near as good as the Pixelbook, and you're going to probably pick up on a lot of that throughout the rest of this as we talk through the last portions of the differences between these two Chromebooks. This one's good. This one's great. So let's talk about the I/O here. So the ports that you actually get, and those are pretty similar between the two devices. So the Samsung Chromebook Pro comes with a single USB-C over here and another one over on the other side, power button, volume rocker. No Kensington lock on this one, so you wouldn't be able to lock it down. Headphone microphone jack. But the interesting addition that you get on the Pro is the addition of the micro SD card slot. So for anyone taking photos or doing stuff with an external device that want to quickly move it to this device without a dongle, this one gives you that ability to do that much quicker. So looking at the Pixelbook, same kind of setup. We've got a USB-C on one side and then a USB-C on the other. And on both of these devices, you can charge and or do dongled outputs and readers and all that. But they both work for all the things USB-C works for. You got your volume rocker and power, headphone microphone jack, and again, no Kensington lock on this one either. So I don't foresee a lot of schools or libraries laying these things out for public use, but just it's worth noting that is not there on either one. This one obviously does not have the SD card slot. So and I've run into that a couple times already where I needed to quickly move a file and had to go get the adapter out. The next part we need to talk about is internals, performance, how fast these things are. So what we're looking at here is a Core M3 Skylake processor, 4 gigs of RAM, 32 gigs of internal storage. Before I make any mention about how that works, we'll talk about what's in this one. This is the baseline. Again, we're comparing the baseline models of these. There are 2 other models you can get of this, but right now this is the baseline $999 version with the Core i5 Kaby Lake, which is a 7th generation processor, 8 gigs of RAM, and 128 gigs of internal storage. So you're getting a lot more internally for this one. But you're also getting double the RAM with the Pixelbook and you're getting 4 times the storage with the Pixelbook. The fact is, there is no version of this with 8 gigs of RAM or anything more than 32 gigs of internal storage. This one already comes with 8 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of internal storage. So that's one thing to consider. So obviously the Pixelbook wins out from a spec comparison, but what's it look like to use them in day-to-day use? I worked from this for a few months, and every once in a while, sure, I'd run into an issue. There's a couple things I use, the web-based SVG editors and stuff that probably aren't great at handling RAM. So Gravit Designer is awesome and is really powerful, but it's not the best at handling RAM. So a lot of times if I would have a lot of images in there editing and clipping this and throwing some SVGs together, I would crash it. It would just completely crash or just completely freeze up. And it was always when I was running Gravit. So it's usually probably a culprit or two that's gonna cause you that issue. Over here, I've been working on the Pixelbook for about a month, doing the same exact type of work, never once crashed it. And so what I believe is that it's a RAM issue. And if I wasn't specifically using Gravit, would never think about it. 4 gigs of RAM for most people is plenty of RAM. Hopefully we will see a version of this device with 8 gigs of RAM. For right now, there isn't one, and again, it will bump the price up. So really what we're talking about is somewhere down in the future. What we're talking about today is 4 gigs versus 8 gigs, and the fact that it from time to time for certain users is gonna make a difference. For the vast majority of you, it probably won't make that much difference. Then we got to talk about internal storage. This one's got a ton of it. This one doesn't have much of it. For Chrome OS users, it's not been that big of a deal, but with Android on board now, you've got to think you're going to be downloading more stuff. You're going to be storing more stuff locally. 32 gigs is probably going to push you eventually. At first, when you first get it out and get it installed, it's okay. And yes, you can expand with SD card storage, but the way that Android works on Chromebooks with SD card storage isn't completely finalized yet, so that's not always going to save you. Over here, you just really don't have to think about it. Storage is just completely a non-issue over on the Pixelbook. So lastly, let's talk about how they perform, the speed that they move. So the Core M3 Skylake is the 6th generation Core M3. This is a Core i5, but it's an i5Y processor, so really it's just a rebranded Core M5, but it's a 7th gen. This processor is the fastest thing I've ever used on a Chromebook. And I'm sure the Core M7 will be even faster whenever it comes out, but it is insanely fast. There's nothing I throw at it that ever slows it down, ever. This one, if I get enough stuff going on it, I can notice that I'm pushing it too hard. But the Pixelbook never, ever, ever slows down, and you get about the same type of battery life. So about 10 hours of mixed use is what Google says. I routinely see 8 if I'm going at it pretty good. So performance-wise, this one wins. And you can look at synthetic benchmarks, and we can look at speedometer, and you can do all that stuff if you want. From using the devices, working from the devices, this one feels a little slower than this one. Now, again, we go back to everyday users, people that may not be doing as heavy and intensive work. It probably gets along just fine for you. It moves along. But when we're comparing these two together, this device is very, very fast, and it is considerably faster than the Samsung Chromebook Pro and gets pretty much the same battery life. So in this category, the Pixelbook definitely wins. So the last thing we're going to talk about before we wrap things up is price. Now, I've said it a few times through the video, but right now you can get this device, the Samsung Chromebook Pro, on Amazon for $450, brand new. Now, when and if that sale goes away, it'll go back up to $550, but usually you can find it around $500 from multiple retailers. The Pixelbook costs $1,000, and that's expensive. And there's a ton of people, thousands, maybe millions of people that you can go look on the internet and find plenty of people going, if you pay this much for a Chromebook, you're stupid. I've read them plenty in the last few weeks. But if Chrome OS does exactly what you need it to do and is your operating system of choice and delivers everything you need it to do, and you want to pay $1,000 to have premium hardware that can stand toe-to-toe with literally anything else on the market from a hardware standpoint, then sure, get the Pixelbook. I did. We got a review unit, but I had to send that one back. I made the decision for myself to purchase the Pixelbook. But I work in Chrome OS literally every day. It's what I use. I even attempted, you all will hear on a podcast and probably see some stuff online, I attempted to work from Windows a little bit and quickly ran back to Chrome OS. Part of that's probably because some of the behaviors I've created around Chrome OS are a certain way, and so I expect computers to work a certain way. But part of it is, regardless of the handful of things I might not be able to do on a Chromebook, I can do 90 to 95% of everything I need to do. And the operating system is just so much better to use on a daily basis. I'm not making the argument that I can do everything you can do on your Windows machine or you can do on your Mac OS. So if you're thinking about commenting about that, just, don't bother. What I am saying is that if you find yourself being able to do most of the things that you do on a Chromebook and you want premium hardware, then yeah, the Pixelbook's a great option. And there's plenty of other people that share that same opinion online too. However, that being said, we have to think about the fact that this device literally costs half of this one. And at this point right now, not even half. So you could buy 2 of these and then go buy some headphones and a fidget spinner and maybe a nice Yeti cup or something like that. I don't know. You could buy lots of stuff with that extra $100. And so my point is, if you just need something to do and use on the side, that it's not going to be your main computing device. It's not the one device that you go to all the time. You just need a Chromebook that works really, really well and has most of the newest features. The Samsung Chromebook Pro is going to be a great device for you. If you're looking for a device where you want the best of everything, you want the best keyboard, you want the best input experiences, you want the best performance, you want the best screen, you want the best pen input, then clearly the Pixelbook is the right choice for you. And it doesn't matter if you can buy 2 of these, because 2 of them together doesn't make the best anything, really. And so it really comes down to what you want and what you expect to get out of a Chromebook. If right now price is a consideration, or you're thinking about, hey, we need to buy 15 Chromebooks for this particular group of people, whether it's students or colleagues or something like that, then obviously price becomes a massive thing. And I would tell you that, hey, to save that amount of money and still get really good devices that have really good experiences, the Chromebook Pro is a great choice, absolutely, 100%. But if it's just you buying a device and you're just like, I really want a great Chromebook, I want the best thing that there is on the market, then it's the Pixelbook, clearly. And so I can't make that decision for you. And I don't want to cop out and say, well, I can't say which one's better. You want to know which one is a better Chromebook? The Pixelbook is a better Chromebook. It's better in pretty much every category. What I can't answer for you is what your financials look like and what your bank account looks like and how many of these you're going to be buying and all of those other things that come into a purchasing decision. What I can tell you is that they're both great. I've enjoyed working on both of them. If I'm choosing, and I did, if I'm choosing with my money which one I'm going to buy and use, I'm going with Pixelbook. But that doesn't mean that if you say, hey, I'd rather save that money and go spend it on something else and buy something else, that you're making a poor purchasing decision. You're going to win with either one of these devices. They're both great. They are different, but they're excellent examples of what Chrome OS is doing right now in the end of 2017. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope we helped you make a purchasing decision today. If we did help you out, give us a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button either below or up here on the screen, and until next time, we'll see you.